You ever notice that there's a bunch of lists of known bad malware, known bad domains, even known things like your known authorized vulnerability scanners or other asset information? Wouldn't it be nice to be able to put those lists to use? This video is on Intel lists. Intel lists is a wonderful feature that allows us to pull down feeds to use as known good, known bad, or any form of automation with things like event rules and other use cases. So the question is, how do these work? How easy is it to set them up? And what do we do with it? So let's first just kind of walk through setting up a simple static list. A static list is one that you supply the values and you kind of maintain over time. Now, this is simply going to Intel List Management or List Manager and just creating one. Justin's test list as an example. And in here, I can specify values and what am I trying to pass. I'll just do domain for this. This tag on observables just means it will tag the observable as Justin's test list so you know where it came from. And then from here, I'm not going to use external feed because this is a static list, but I can specify something here like evil.com, evil.tk, and so on. Hit next and create. And at this point, I now have Justin's test list, 2 values. That also means that if I want to update this, I can manually edit and add or change the values, or I can do it directly from the event queue because I can select something that's an actual domain name. I'm not going to find one here because I don't want to go scrolling, but just click on one if you find one, add the list, select your list. Notice it's not letting me select my new list, but that's because the observable I clicked on is a command, not a domain. So there's a little bit of safety net built into there. Now, once I have these lists, that allows me to use them as part of an event rule, a form of automation. If you're not familiar with event rules, check out the event rule video. It's definitely worth your time. But that's going to let me do stuff like auto handle false positives or auto tag things as malicious, change the severity, auto add to certain cases, and things like that. Plus, it's just going to add context to the analyst looking at the event. But I kind of want these to be a bit more dynamic in nature. Just having things like static lists, while helpful, you notice I'm using authorized scanners. I can use that with false positive techniques like it's an intrusion detection system alarm coming from like a vulnerability scanner. In this case, I can be like, don't worry about it. It's my vulnerability scanner, right? So we'll just get rid of that. Okay. But what about something that the list is a bit more dynamic in nature? So for that, watch this. I'm going to do new list. This one will do known bad URLs. Well, actually, let's do this. Malicious URLs. Okay. I'm going to set this as just standard values. Patterns would let me do regex, so you could have a static list that's based on regex. But values and CSVs I can use for dynamic lists. I'm going to pick a simple dynamic list that's just pure values that is based on URLs. I tend to always tag personally, that's my preference. And this time I'm going to make it an external feed, which means it's going to, in the background, pull this list and keep it updated. For this test, I'm going to use URL house, and I'm going to pull down their known active malware URLs. So if I open this in a different tab, you can see these are all known bad URLs. They're malicious. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that URL, and I'm going to paste it here, and we'll do something like update this every, in this case, hour. Could be every day, could be every few minutes. You pick depending on the feed. If it's a short-term feed that needs to be more active, maybe lower it. If it's something that gets updated once a day, you don't really need to pull it more, but I'm just going to set this to 60 for right now. And I'm not going to specify any values because I want it to go get it and bring it in itself. I'll hit next and create. Now, notice value count is currently 0. It's a dynamic list. It's not done. It's got to go out and get it, pull it, and load it into the system. So what happens is in the background, since it sees I created a new one, in about a couple minutes, it'll pull these in for me. At that point, the data will be loaded into the backend standard system, as well as memcache for memory high-speed searching. Why? Because we want you to be able to correlate against these in high speed for pretty much anything. So we load it into memory, and if you ever restart your Reflex instances, we pull it out of the backend storage system back into RAM so it will work at really high speeds so you can do things you normally wouldn't have done. Like when we were testing this, we were loading through like 1 million events, just boom, 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 boom. Without memcache, it didn't keep up, but when we added it in, we were able to achieve some really cool off-the-wall things. So we put it in there. So just know that's how that's working. While I'm waiting for this, let's just kind of go back to new list for a second. I could also do a multi-pull because there are some lists that you go to pull them. Let's see if I can find one here, like collected payloads. If I download this, I'll give that a second, it's a CSV, which means it contains MD5, SHA-256, and multiple things in it. Well, what I just did a second ago with a simple value list, that won't work because that expects one value down the whole list that it's pulling in. But I can integrate with things like, say, CSV, and soon we're hoping to have JSON support as well. And you'll notice I'll still put the URL on the external feed. The difference is I'll pass the column headers and the mappings for the observables here so that it can pull multiple things. Like this is a known bad URL, this is the hash of a known file from that URL, or so on. And you can have it all on one feed. And at that point, you can still reference the individual fields in Intel rules with event rules. So just know you have the option to use simple dynamic feeds as well as some more complex ones. And you can load this thing up quite a bit and have your data in there. Now, let me give this a second for the background puller to pull in our first test list, and then I'll come back and show you a little bit more. And there we have it. The malicious URLs has pulled in 641 entries. Our list is now populated. I can switch to Intel Explorer and I can look through some of this data, search upon it, just kind of see what's in there. But again, the main value here is now that I have an Intel list that is dynamically going to be kept up to date, I've got it pulling every hour, I can use that in event rules and query against it for tagging, merging to case, auto dismissals, and more. So Intel lists, really great. You can have static, you can have dynamic. They're really powerful in conjunction with event rule automation. And there you go.